recording has begun, Siddharth.
Yeah. So hello everyone. This is a short discussion on the Kohli community that we're going to have for our heritage course purposes for our second year for Ramnath Ruia College. Let's begin with a short intro about our guest today. Taking a departure from her IT job to follow her culinary dream, she is the happiest when serving the food of her ancestors, which is in fact the Kohli food. Being an ardent expert on the Kohli community, she also retails traditional spices and cooking tools from across Maharashtra on her e-site Annaparabhrahma, breaking down complex dishes into simple subjects and taking her audience on a masala trail is her forte. Please welcome Mrs. Anjali Kohli Cooper. So welcome, ma'am, and thank you so much for helping us with our assignment. Let's begin with the first question, ma'am. Could you please give us a brief insight on the Kohli community?
Yeah, so actually, to see this particular question is quite vague. Actually, when you say insight, uh, I would say, let's begin with the intro. So I'm not sure about what is the composition of your class, whether all students are from Mumbai or they are from outside Mumbai. So I will assume that this recording will be also listened to by people who are not from Mumbai. So there are Koris, as we call the fisher folk community, which resides on the shores of Maharashtra. Now, this fisher folk community, if you are a resident of Mumbai, you will just not miss it. But the larger country population does not know that there is a community called Kori, and they reside on the shores. So, what are the markers of the community? The markers of the community, obviously, people have still stuck to their traditional way of dressing, and that is the Nauwari sari, or what we call in local parlance the Kashti sari. The Kashti sari is worn like a dhoti, and you cover the top with the pallu, and the pallu is taken in the front. It has it almost works like an apron, as well as for keeping your secret stash of cash. So as you know that this is the dressing of the women. As you know, the Kori women, they are into retailing. The men go to fish, they get the fish, and then women retail it. So retail it in a small way or in a big way. So you need place to hide in all that money. In the olden days, definitely no one roamed around with a purse. So what we had was a pishwi, or a small pouch with drawstrings, and that used to be used to store the money, and then that used to be rolled up in the pallu, which is in the front, and tucked into the belly. So that is the marker for the women. For the men, they wear the what we call surka or rumal. It is a large square piece of cloth which looks like a lungi, but it is worn in a different way. It's worn in a triangular fashion, like a samosa in the front, and there is a kashta, which is which is like a kacha, which passes under the legs like a kacha. So that is the dressing of the men. But obviously now, we are in modern day, and even the surka has been or rumal has been discarded. Men have moved to easier ways of dressing, like shorts, and shorts for business, and full pants for the daily wear. Because also, though there is a large part of the community, sadly we have to distinguish that a large large part of the community which is in the business right now is not so educated, whereas the educated men, it's even worse. They have discarded their professional the traditional occupation and moved on to other jobs in the government, or doing business. So that is the introduction to the Koris. So moving on to food, how do because obviously, the primary way of marking Koris is their appearance. Then second thing that marks, let's talk, before moving on to food, because our focus is on that. So let's also understand what are the other markers of a Kori. So the other markers is the religion. Now, if you go to see today, Koris are mostly Hindus, but to begin with, they were not Hindus. This is the Britishers' folly, which has created this, Kori Hindu community. To begin with, Koris are animistic. So I don't, I'm assuming that you don't know what is animism. Animism is nature worship. So basically, everything that is, the force of nature, like whether it is the sea or the winds or the clouds, or, even the lunar phases, all that is worshipped, as nature has the power to make you bend, especially in our traditional profession of fishing. So that's the reason nature's forces are worshipped. And we also put in these nature's forces into say idols, like a stone, if it had a certain shape, or if it had risen on its own, like it happens, say in in Khanderi, which is a fort outside my village. And there is this geographical phenomena where there is a peak which has risen from the earth. It's an island fort, and in that there is a peak which has risen from the sea and come up, and that has been obviously because it's a natural phenomena, and it also shows that the earth is live. It is worshipped as Vetar, or the god who protects our seas. So that is the second marker, that our religion is an animism. And even though the Britishers classified Koris as because they were not able to understand who the Koris are, they did not have clue about animism. So what they did was, very conveniently, when they did the schedules of the caste, they have included us in the caste system as the lowest rung, because they thought that this community was not fitting in elsewhere. So they have put in along with the scheduled caste and scheduled sorry, we have gone into the scheduled tribe. I'm correcting here. It is the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes. We are the scheduled tribes. So that is how they put the Koris into the scheduled tribe, scheduled tribe others. And then onwards, because of this classifications, Koris also started worshipping, and it was not that they were not worshipping Hindu gods. They because we have that fluidity in India, where yeah, you are not restricted to worshipping a certain type of a god or certain religion. So and then also, among the Koris, few of them were converted by the British and the Portuguese, and that's why you will find a few Christian Koris too. Now, so that is the second marker. Then what is the third marker? The third marker, and a very distinct one, is food. So since the profession is profession is of fishing, to begin with, it was on close to shore. Then later, I'm talking about right from the beginning of earth. So fish were caught on the shore. They were hunted down literally with arrows and bows. And so slowly, as we progressed, we started making nets. And the name of the Koris came from that, the making of the nets. So the nets are woven, and therefore they compared it to the spider and or the weaver. So that's how Koris got the name. And if you see, Kori is not limited to fisher folk. Across India, especially in Punjab, the Kohlis that we know, they are also considered as Kohlis, but and the definition is the same, but that they are weavers, but they are not fisher folk. So that is the difference. So that should never be mixed up. So Virat Kohli is not a Kohli. Okay. So that is about yeah. So I was saying that since our job is of fishing, obviously the food is focused around fish. So initially food was only fish, but as the community became agrarian also, then we started including what is grown locally in this region is rice, and therefore rice became our staple food. So you would see rice in the form of obviously steamed rice, or rice which you boil and eat. But also we started making rice flour and using that for making rice roti, or what you know as bakri. But in Kori we always call it as roti. So rice roti and rice is what we use to eat with fish and fish curries. And also curries have come in later, but it was mainly roasted fish or boiled fish that was our main food. So that is the top level introduction to Koreans. So I
No, ma'am,
hope
that was
that
indeed
gives you
a
insights.
yeah, it was really a wonderful insight in the Kohli community, ma'am. And from not only from Maharashtra, I think from across India, you've covered everything. So thank you so much for that. So the next question shall be asked by Gargi Kamble. Over to you, Gargi.
Good morning, ma'am. So, ma'am,
Good
whatever
morning.
you told about the clothing, and extension to that only, we have always observed that Koli women have always worn their jewelry with pride, even during their daily tasks. Is there any historical significance to that or any other specific reason?
See, it's the Koli women I would credit that they are carrying forward what is totally Indian. So the jewelry wearing has been very typical of Indian culture. So it's not just the Koris. If you see the old cultures like in Kerala, or even if you see the Harappan idols that you see, there were no clothes. People wore jewelry to cover their private parts. And even that, covering the private parts also was not the aim. It was rather decoration of your body. So, and also if you see, history tells us that we were very rich in minerals, and gold was the most prized mineral. So that's how the decoration of the body is seen in the form of jewelry. And Koli women still do it, mainly because see, earlier houses were not having any locking system or safety system. So what you did was either you buried the jewelry somewhere in your land, or you wore it. And it was rather safe to wear it, because Kolis that way, being fishing community, and living with the forces of nature, they were known to be very fierce. So there was no danger of looting. And also this thing of, if you were well off, you showed. So especially the women, they found a lot of assurance in wearing their jewelry, because they knew that they were not dependent on anyone. So if they always carried that pride that they were independent, and they had their own jewelry and could take care of themselves. So it was like, beware men, we are always ready to face life without you. So that's the kind of attitude that has been behind wearing so much jewelry.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Like we've been always curious about why is that they wear so much jewelry. Thank you so much, ma'am, for telling this. And ma'am, as you told that many Christians, many Kolis have been converted into Christians. So is there any difference between their clothing style or anything?
There, see, if they have been agrarian Koris, then there is a difference. It was mainly because, if you look at the Christian culture as such, it is about going to church and marking their Christianity as such. So the Koris which had converted, they wore a certain type of it was a Nawari sari, but it was in a different fashion, where if you observe, the Kori sari is worn with a tight kashta, whereas the other sari, which the Christian Koris, there are Christian Koris who also wear the Nawari kashta like it is worn traditionally, but there are the agrarian Christian Koris who wear the sari with a little, with a loose kashta, and that is they call it lugda. So it's just a local variation, and they wore red lugda or purple lugda to mark their that they are different from the Hindu Koris. So that is the slight difference. It's a nuance that an outsider will miss easily. Also, the Christian Koris, they see, like the Hindu Koris, they wear cotton veils, or what we call surka on top of the saris, which is white in color with prints. Nowadays, I don't see many wearing it, because that surka and that whole thing of being the false dignity that the British created in the Indian population has now been chucked down the drain. So no one wears the surka anymore, but the Christian Koris would wear a lacy veil over the sari, over the lugda. So that is another difference. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. As you rightly said, we would really didn't know the difference between them. So, ma'am, the further questions will be asked by Shruti Hinge. Over to you, Shruti.
All right.
Thank you, Gargi. So, ma'am, you talked about how the fish curry used to be paired with rice and how they used to eat it. So, my question
Yeah.
is, which is that one Koli dish that you think is prepared in every Koli household during a festival?
See, actually, if you're talking of current day, the sweets, or because if we talk about festival, then we talk about sweets, because that is what is offered to God. Or if it is not a Hindu God that we are worshipping. If it is one of our animistic religion type of a god, like a Vetar, or then for the Vetar, part of worship and part of offering is mutton. So if the because animism believes in sacrifice. So for the sacrifice, if a goat was sacrificed, then mutton would be made to for the Vetar. Now the celebration for Vetar is not on a common day. It depends from village to village, and there is a certain day identified by every village. It could be around harvest time, but there is no common day as such. So that is one thing that is offered. And if it comes to sweets, then in modern day it varies. I mean, today people are making puran polis and other things, but the earlier there was no single sweet which was made. But what was common for Ganpati, I would say, again, Ganpati I'm mentioning as a later development, because now Ganpati festival, after the Kori started worshipping Hindu gods, Ganpati is one of the biggest festivals that is celebrated in our community. And so for Ganpati, Modak is the most common sweet that is offered. And but otherwise, there have been traditional sweets made out of jaggery and coconut and rice. So that's why Modak is also made of rice flour, jaggery, and coconut. Now there are other variations which are common. But like I said, there is no single sweet which will stand out. Like, say, when you talk of Holi in the rest of Maharashtra, it is Puran Poli which is distinctive. But that's not the case among Koris. So we have something called Mungori. So Mungori is, rice balls. They are made in marble size, and then they are cooked in coconut milk and jaggery. So it's something between a kheer and this made with rice balls. So that is one thing. Then there is rice kheer, but rice kheer again, it's more to be made on Shraddh. So we don't offer it as a auspicious food. So that is about it. And then say if we are talking about weddings, then of course weddings is festivities but not a festival. So in weddings, what is very common is we make this ghor fish or the larger fishes. So it could also be those, see, goldfish is very expensive and a rare find. So people wait that if for a wedding you have goldfish, then it's a marker of your prestigious status. Whereas say for a lesser family, they would also use pakat. Pakat is kite fish, so they are also huge. So they would use that, or a shark, which is large enough to feed a large amount of people. So those are the kind of things that would be made for weddings.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that insight. I actually had no idea about so many things about the Koli community. So my next question to you, ma'am, is that it is said that the divine taste of the Koli food lies in the Koli masala. So to what extent is it actually true?
Yeah, that's a very funny situation we Indians have got into. Today worldwide, when you talk to someone and say that you're an Indian, they will first say, "Oh, spicy food." That's how they identify us. But you being students of history, you would know that spices, as in how India knew it, was mainly pepper and other spices, which grew in India. But chilies, which we love, have come to India only with the Portuguese. So, today, if even my own community, those who don't know history, and even say up to 3 generations, because even when my grandfather was around, if you had asked him that, how do you like your kanji? Kanji is basically curry. So any fish curry is called kanji in Kori. So it's not to be confused with the rice gruel that the rest of the world knows. That is different. For us, kanji is fish curry. So if I had asked my grandfather that, what, can you imagine your kanji without masala? He will say, what taste would that curry have if it is not masala? But I was lucky to present and backtrack into history a curry which we call ukad, for a TV show called Curries of India. And there I have shown how this ukad used to be made. So that it was actually oil free, mainly a boiled stew, which you could make with fresh or dried fish, and it would be flavored with any souring agent depending on the season. So sometimes it would be raw mangoes in summer. In the monsoons, it could be kokum or ambushi, dried mango, salted and used. So that was the kind of curry, and it used to be spiced with pepper or long pepper, which we call pipli. So, and lots of garlic, everything from what you grew. So you could add even ginger if you had that. So this was basically the type of curry that we were used to. But now ukad has become what they call a sick man's soothing curry. So now Kodis, if would eat a ukad, in fact, it's a joke that if someone is ill, and no one likes food which is eaten in that sick period, right? So they tease, they say, are you going to eat ukad? Or if the curry is not spicy enough, they will tease that person who made it, that, oh, what is this, you've made a ukad. But ukad was the staple in the past.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really insightful from your side.
Yeah, just 1 minute. I want to add about, so I've told you about, how historically this curry was, but today, I mean, let me also talk about today. So the masala that we use now is a masala which we make out of 18 ingredients, about 17, 18 ingredients. And for that, you can access my blog, because just in the last month, I have done a session for Masala Trail for Asiatic Society. So all that is on my blog. So you will have all the spices explored in that. And so that all those spices which I have talked about is part of the Kori masala. And we use 2-3 types of chilies. And we make this masala once in a year or maybe twice in a year when it is not the monsoon season. So because it should stay good for the rest of the time. So that is our key masala, and one and only masala which we add to everything. In fact, now that we are also vegetable eaters, and unfortunately or fortunately, I am a pure vegetarian, so even our bhajis have that masala. So if you go to see, that one masala has become a trademark identifier of Kori food. And we cannot think about our food without it. It's why we make it as a single masala with so many spices is that Koris have always been, the women as well, have been part of the business that they do. The occupation is not limited to the man. So it wasn't like other communities where the man went out and women sat at home and cooked. It was never like that, because if the man went to the sea, he did the fishing, and because it was done at odd hours and all that, he would get that fish back home, and then it was the woman's responsibility to sell it. So the women have been oh, I think it is giving a message that Zoom might end.
Yeah,
So
no, ma'am.
we have to rush
Remove
off.
that
Or
limit on
maybe,
the meeting.
yeah, or maybe if you want to extend it a little bit, or
No, ma'am. I think it's extended. It just told me
huh,
it has
okay,
removed that limit. So let's
okay,
see how
okay.
far you can go.
Yeah. Okay, okay. So I'll just, I love to talk about my community, so I'm giving you details. So, but I think we'll have to rush through this now. Yeah, so this Kori masala was devised mainly because, since the women were working, we wanted something very quick. So, we don't have time to, gather all the masala, set up the meze and prepare your, luxurious meals. So what we do is this one masala which is made, which is like a instant flavoring, So you boil the fish, make your tadka, add the masala, and the curry is ready to have with rice. So that's an indication of how industrious Koris are and have adapted their food habits with the masala. Yeah. So go
Thank
ahead with the next question.
Thank you, ma'am. All those dishes that you said, they really do sound very delicious. So, ma'am, the next question will be asked by Anjali. Over to you, Anjali.
Thank you, Shruti. It was amazing information, ma'am, and we actually did
I
know
can't
about.
hear you clearly. You'll have to speak up.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, better.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. You gave amazing information, and we didn't know about so many facts. But my question to you is, what are the present day problems that you think the Koli community faces?
Oh, that is a Pandora's box, if you're asking me, because I think the Kori community is hit by this metropolization of Mumbai a lot, that you are all aware about, So I don't want to get into the elaborate and political, things about how that has affected the Koris, because it is also interpreted wrongly, because people think that Koris don't want, outsiders to come to Mumbai and, or the coast. And that's not true, because, the Koris are the most hospitable and warm people. And it is not about, not letting people come to Mumbai, or not, accepting outsiders. It is to what limit? Because see, the Kori community has been so hospitable and accepting right from the beginning, that today the situation of the Koris is that we've lost our villages, we have lost our land, everything has been given to the government. And even if there is compensation, the compensation is not, relevant, because because of the loss of your shore, land. You move into the land inwards, and how do you carry out fishing? So it affects the occupation in a big way. And that's why, then what has happened is, Kori community is actually vanishing, because they are taking up jobs which are provided to the project affected. So that is a huge impact. And I don't want to be politically correct over here. I will say that somewhere this has to stop, because the government has destroyed the shoreline totally, and it is not something that you can create again. See, today we are talking about, the the shore route which is being created. Will you be able to create the same tidal zone somewhere else? Is it that so easy that you will create the natural environment for fishing which is viable? It's not possible. So that is one major thing. Another major thing what I see, which is not talked about so much, is that the women and health. What I see, that our Kori women, who are into business, have a very, very long day. The man, he comes from fishing, and he might be sitting at his like you have offices, we have the bandar, or the fish drying fields, and a small hut where the man sits and does business. But for the women, it's a very long day, because for small scale retailers, they take the fish from the bandar, or the ship hangers, and they take it and go to the various markets to sell. And in that whole day, the women rarely get enough nutrition. If you see, especially in Mumbai, women tend to live literally on vada pav, you know and therefore that has affected their health, and their family situations a lot. So that is something that I want, to draw the attention of the administrators to look into, and make sure that every market, because all markets are not municipality built markets, these are sometimes street stalls, so to make sure that there is food available, healthy food, nutritious food available to these women, so that they can spare the time to keep themselves healthy, and get enough nutrition. So these are the two main concerns about the Koris. But I think, even those Koris which have moved away from their profession, I think as a community, most people are doing well. We have had, being a metropolitan city, the Kori community has had access to good education. And I mean, I very proudly say that I was lucky to get a opportunity that my grandmothers did not get. So that definitely, I mean, there is progress. But would you call me a Kori? Because I don't do any of my traditional my occupation is not fishing. I don't do any of the business that Koris do. So as a Kori, born into a Kori family, I try to at least keep up my heritage by talking about it more and trying to document what I have assimilated as a Kori born into this community.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And many unknown facts revealed, and we literally didn't knew that the community faces so much problems nowadays. So, ma'am, we move on to our concluding question. So, to conclude, ma'am, will you suggest to our audience the top three restaurants in Mumbai, the Koli restaurants in Mumbai?
Um, Actually, in Thane, there are a couple of restaurants, but I don't think there is any in South Mumbai. I haven't heard of. There are Kori caterers, but I'm not aware about restaurants in South Mumbai. But you will get a lot of food stalls. If you go to Kori villages, you will have women making rice roti. So say you go to Trombe or say you go to Mahim or even Kulaba Koriwada, there are women who make rice rotis at home. And there are women who sell, fried fish or curries. Basically, all that happens through dabba delivery, or maybe outside their homes they might set up these stalls. So basically it is a home food business, not a restaurant business, unlike there is one Mihai Kori or something in Thane. So in Thane they have had restaurants, and Mihai Kori, I have seen the pictures. I haven't visited, but it looks like a very cool place. They have tried to give the good ambience of actual Kori homes and village. Mhm.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like Siddharth to conclude the session.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. This was really a very insightful session. We were really familiarized with the Koli community, and we also hope that our audience who is watching this are also familiarized with the same. So, thank you so much, ma'am, once again. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Love talking to you all the best for your studies. And I hope you take this voice ahead. And
Yes, ma'am.
all the best for your project.
Thank you,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Bye.